There's an old painting of a shepherd you might see sometime. He's a strong young man, meant to look like Jesus, and he's rescuing a lamb. The lamb is in a terrible spot. It's got itself stuck on what looks like the side of a cliff. And the shepherd is also on steep terrain, and he's hanging on with one hand, and with his other hand, he's reaching out to try to help that sheep. Now, I don't own a copy of that picture, but when I see it, it really touches my heart, because it reminds me of the teenager and the young man that I was and the shepherd that I have. He didn't just stay back with the 99 smart and obedient sheep. Somehow he still cared for the stupid one who kept wandering off. And I think the way that image speaks to me may help answer a basic question we may have about Good Shepherd Sunday. What is it about Jesus as shepherd that is so important that the church emphasizes it every year? Well, it may be that this wise image given to us by God really helps us to see who Jesus is and who we should be in our relationship to him. So let's take a close look at it. You know, the 4 verses the church gives us in our short gospel today, they're the last of over 20 verses on this subject in the same spot, John chapter 10. That many words directly from Jesus on the same subject tell us that this is important. And we also know it's important because God's been using this image up to this time in the Old Testament for centuries, before Jesus brings it all to fullness. Going back, right, we see this image in King David, who's an early image of the true king of God's people, who's Jesus. David makes his first appearance in our story as a shepherd boy. And when the prophet Samuel visits Jesse to anoint one of his many sons king, David is the only one still at work. He's out tending his sheep. And later, when Saul tells David he's too young to take on Goliath, David tells Saul, I have defended my sheep from lions and bears. In other words, he's risked his life for his sheep. Years later, of course, David becomes a great and tremendously successful king, the good, great king of Israel. And it's at that time this former shepherd realizes that even though he's the king, he realizes in humility God is his shepherd. And so he gives us a beautiful song, right, that we call Psalm 23, where he sings about how the Lord is his shepherd. Even though he's the king, he sings about how the shepherd takes care of him and how he trusts the shepherd. And the Bible is clear that David becomes what God wants him to become precisely because he knows who's really in charge. And with problem after problem, challenge after challenge, he puts his trust in God. And that's expressed in his Psalm 23. Later, the prophet Ezekiel, through the prophet Ezekiel, God speaks to the religious leaders of Israel, and he tells them they've been bad shepherds. So bad that God says, I myself will shepherd my sheep. And of course, all this is fulfilled in Jesus, as he says today, my Father and I will shepherd the sheep. My Father and I are one, and I will lay down my life for the sheep. Okay, well, what about our other readings today? Well, in this teaching in John 10, Jesus also says, I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I will bring them also. They too will heed my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. This is what we see in our first and second readings. Our first reading takes place at a time that's still pretty early in the time of the church. And the idea in the reading, right, that Jesus is not just for the Jews, but he's for everyone, that's still a new idea for the church. Peter announced it in Acts 10. Now here we're only 3 chapters later, and Paul and Barnabas announce it in Antioch to an enormous crowd, almost the whole city, it says, right? So the apostles, the gospel is going to the Gentiles, and the Gentiles are overjoyed, fulfilling what Jesus said. I have other sheep, and I'm going to bring them in, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. This idea is also in our second reading. As John sees the great multitude of the faithful in heaven, he says Christ will shepherd them. And they are from every nation, every race, every language. All right, so looking at this image of the Good Shepherd, what does it tell us about Jesus? Well, first, as a good shepherd protects his sheep from the wolf, Jesus will protect us from evil, from Satan. We have to remember, on our own, we are no match for the enemy. Only with the protection of Christ, especially the protection from this table, are we safe. Second, Christ loves each of us so much, each one of us so much, that he will lay down his life to free us and to protect us from that wolf. Now we know that's true because he's already done it. Third, Jesus told us he won't give up on a single one of us. And we should all be grateful with all our hearts that we have that kind of a shepherd. Okay, that's Jesus. Now, what does this image tell us about ourselves and the relationship that we should have or try to have with Jesus? Well, for one, sheep trust the shepherd. They know he knows what he's doing. God doesn't want us to worry. It is true that we are in a tough place on this side of heaven. Jesus calls Satan the prince of this world, right? There is evil here. We see it all around us. But even though we walk in the dark valley, we don't have to fear the evil that we see around us. Another thing is that Jesus says his sheep know their shepherd's voice, and that's the voice they follow. So in the world of sheep and shepherds, there are often other flocks nearby with other shepherds. And the sheep hear those other voices, but they know not to follow them. They know the voice of their shepherd. Now, God's great gift to humanity is our free will. But as a result of that, there are a lot of other voices out there. And there are a lot of other voices to follow, and there are a lot of sheep following the wrong voice. We need to be smart enough not to follow those other voices. We need to pray for the grace to recognize the voice of the Good Shepherd and only follow that voice. And finally, this is obvious, but I mention it because I've had trouble with it. The sheep don't lead the shepherd. So That's not to say we can't cry out to the shepherd, ask for help, even make a suggestion. He wants to go that way. This way looks easier, maybe? We can talk to our shepherd, of course, but it does mean we don't forget who's in charge, who leads, and who follows. And it also means remembering, even when he decides to lead us on a path that looks bad, a path that looks hard, he is always trying to lead us to an even better place. Only he knows how to get there. Only he knows how to get to that better place. We don't. So as we continue with Mass, may we ask God for the grace to trust our shepherd, to recognize his voice, and to follow only his voice. And may we be thankful for a shepherd who loves us so much, he's willing to lay down his life for us, and love us so much, he'll never give up on a single one of us.